Welcome back to Breakbeat Code. Up next, we're going to have a conversation with Samaira Mehta. Described by Vogue Magazine as a 15-year-old entrepreneur, CEO, and feminist STEM advocate, Samaira Mehta is breaking down barriers for the future of technology. Her inventions, CoderBunnyz, CoderMindz, and CoderMarz, are board games that simplify the intricacies of coding and AI into methodologies that children as young as 6 years old can understand. Mehta received a letter from former First Lady Michelle Obama, is the youngest recipient of the nation's most prestigious undergraduate award, the Davidson Fellowship, is a SoftBank Masonson Scholar, and works with the United Nations for gender equality. She was featured on platforms like CNBC, Business Insider, Today's Show, Washington Post for her creations, and 500 plus workshops that spotlight her board games, through which she's taught over 60,000 kids to code. I did mention she's 15 years old. So Samayra has been a speaker at over 100 conferences, including MWC and corporations like Google, Facebook, SAP, Walmart, and IBM. She's even started her own business camp for aspiring entrepreneurs called Boss Biz, which has raised $15,000 and taught over 300 people worldwide. After living by the motto, see a need, fill a need, Samayra decided to work towards lowering the fatality rate of ovarian cancer. Her invention, a low-cost Raspberry Pi, an AI-powered device that detects crucial biomarkers, won her first at the California State Science Fair. She was also invited to be recognized for her work on the Senate floor as part of AAPI Month, and was a top 10 finalist for one of the nation's most prestigious science competitions, the 3M Young Scientist Challenge. Samayra is currently working on this project with UCLA to help better the lives of thousands of patients affected across the world. She's also working on publishing her first novel with MIT Press and releasing her podcast. Samayra aspires to pursue future studies in computer science, entrepreneurship, and feminist and gender studies. And she hopes to keep innovating and sharing her knowledge around the world. So please welcome Samaira Mehta. All right, Samayra, thank you so much for joining. Great to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
So tell us a little bit about you, who you are, and what you do.
Yes, absolutely. So my name is Samaira Mehta. I'm 15 years old. I'm a sophomore at Archbishop Mitty High School in San Jose, California. And ever since I was very little, I was very fortunate to grow up in an environment where my teachers and my mentors and my parents fostered in me a sort of mindset that I was never too young to create change. So if I, as a kid, saw a problem, then I absolutely could do something to combat it. And so when I was 7 years old and I was introduced to coding through a prank that my dad played on me, I immediately fell in love with writing code, creating my own programs, creating my own games. But I saw that a lot of my 7-year-old friends didn't share the same passion that I did. And so I saw a problem, and I was a stubborn 7-year-old, and I was like, I have to find a way to make coding fun for my friends. So I took something that they liked, which was board games, and through board games, I wanted to prove to them how fun coding could be. So I developed a board game to teach kids how to code called CoderBunnyz. And from there, I have been expanding this sort of educational line into various other board games that teach kids AI, various forms of computer science, and all of this with a goal to help young kids get excited about coding, because I saw that not only was I able to change my friends' mindsets about coding, but as I began holding workshops and events, I was able to change the minds of so many people across the world. And in this process, one thing I really saw was a lack of almost girls coming to my coding workshops. And I saw that in these workshops I'd hold, there'd be like 15 boys and 5 girls. And it was extremely discouraging to look around and see that there was almost nobody who looked like me in that room. And so from a very young age, I became aware of this sort of gender bias in technology. And it became something I wanted to combat. So I began holding workshops dedicated towards girls only to get them motivated and excited, because I noticed from personal experience that when girls see themselves in an environment with other girls doing the same thing, they all feel motivated that this is an end goal that they could achieve. But sort of continuing on that, when I was in 8th grade, I saw that my science teacher's mother passed away due to ovarian cancer. And I was extremely shocked, to say the least, to see the extent of research that had been done in ovarian cancer, which was very minimal because this was a disease that affected women. And due to the fact that when doctors work in medicine, the main body they look at is the male body. So issues that affect women are almost always overlooked. And so once again, with that mindset that you are never too young to create change, I developed a tool that uses artificial intelligence to help doctors in precision medicine with ovarian cancer patients. And I was inspired by my science teacher to apply at my local science fair. And then I created, and it kept going on. And eventually this project got first in the state of California at the California State Science Fair. And now I'm currently working with the UCLA Ovarian Cancer Department to further expand this tool into our healthcare system today. And so that's a little bit about me. I'm a 15-year-old, but I really enjoy working on projects that sort of foster social change and social good.
You are awesome. When I first met you on, it was through LinkedIn, and I look at your profile, like, wow, this is like someone who should be like on the 30 under 30 list. Because I assumed you were like just after college, but had been like super successful entrepreneur, and you're 15. So it's like, and like that's I think that can be humbling for adults to see like what you've done. The first time I met you, like since then I've been like super inspired. Like, wow, Samayra can do it, you know. And yeah, it's so impressed with you. So I before I go on, I do want to go back to something you said earlier. You said it started off with a prank from your dad.
Mm-hmm.
What did he do?
Yeah, so basically, I think to sort of give you a preface, my parents have always like given me these opportunities and introduced me to new ideas and projects and almost like opportunities, but they never like forced anything upon me. So like I did like ice skating, I tried swimming, I played the piano, which I very much did not enjoy. But also, like when I was 7 years old, my dad played a little prank on me, which was he showed me a button on his computer that was like, press this if you're beautiful. And he told me to give it a try. But when my mouse pointer touched that little command, it disappeared. And so at first I was confused. I was like, how did you do this? Am I not beautiful? Like, what's going on here? And my dad told me that he used something called coding to create it. And so that's when I immediately grew really, really hooked onto coding. And I was like, I need to be able to create pranks like these to play on my friends. And so I started learning how to code.
So you are so creative. What's your creative process like? Are you the type of person that kind of has this like kind of Archimedes aha moment when you're relaxing? Is it like really intentional? Like, do you like work with others to like get creative? Like, what does your process look like?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And if I'm being completely honest, I'd say my best ideas come to me in my sleep. And I think to sort of make that make sense, I normally think about something, and like I use this exact same mechanism. I mean, I'm a high schooler to study and memorize facts too. But I normally, like if I'm intentionally trying to create something, or I'm like, wait, like this is a problem, but I don't quite know what to do about it, I will do like extensive research on this before I sleep, like the scope of this problem, like which communities does it affect? What are the current solutions out there? Let's say like I'm trying to develop something new. And then I'll like sleep on it. And my dreams will curate something, and I wake up the next morning and I'm like, wait, what if I try this? And so like the same thing, like I had a Spanish test yesterday. And so I just looked over all my vocabulary words and I went to sleep, and I woke up like 10 minutes early this morning and I reviewed the vocabulary words, and they were like embedded in my brain because I just looked at them the night before. So I'd say that like that's sort of how my creative process works, which I think is really hard to explain, but I think a lot of my really good ideas come to me in my sleep.
Wow. And is it Now I'm so curious about that. Is it like a lucid dream where you know you're dreaming and you can literally see like the idea playing out, or is it more like subconscious where you just kind of intentionally think about this thing, you kind of go away, and then there's the idea when you come out? Like, what is that actually experience? What's the experience like?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot more subconscious, because like, yes, I'm intentionally thinking about it, but like I have like all these like thoughts in my brain about like, oh, like this is what's currently done, this is like the communities it affects, like what can I do to like, I keep thinking about it. And I think the moment like I take a step away from my computer, like where I'm like thinking about something else, like I move on, like, but those thoughts are still flowing in my head. I think that's how the best ideas come to mind, because like if you're constantly going to be staring at your computer screen, like you are like, what for me personally, like I just get blocked. I don't know what I'm doing, and I feel a sense of like I'm not getting anywhere with this. So I think sometimes, especially when I have mental blocks, like my best thing is I step away from my computer, I do something else, and then I come back to it in like 15 minutes and try again, or I sleep on it and I come the next morning. So that's what works for me personally.
So one thing that's really inspiring about you is this idea of imposter syndrome. I'm gonna give you a little story about my experience of this. Like when my first job ever was a school teacher, and like before my first day of school, teaching, like at that time I was like kind of 24 or 5, and I had this idea I got to show up like an adult, right? And I had this idea like this is how an adult would teach. This is what an adult would say. I had this idea like how I should show up, and as soon as I walked in the room, I just started sweating. Like it's the only time in my life I've like actually sweat during a presentation, and I think it was because I was trying to be someone I wasn't, right? And I had this like what we now call imposter syndrome. This idea that you're an imposter. You're just like you're pretending to be something you're not. You impressed me for so many reasons. One of it, you're very clearly, authentically yourself. Like you are clearly you speak like someone your age. At the same time, you also show up with someone who's like could be 35. Like you're just very composed and you claim your space, if you will. Like, but have you even experienced imposter syndrome? Like, does this ever like what does that even look like for you? Because it like in some ways you're like this child prodigy who like was creating this stuff when you're 6. So I don't even know if you've had that experience before, but like when I say it's imposter syndrome, like what does that sound like to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are so many times that I can't even begin to tell you when I feel imposter syndrome. And so I'd say that one thing I love about myself is my confidence, but I would also say that it took a lot of time to build and a lot of experience to almost create. So I think for me personally, like imposter syndrome and like especially like overcoming it, especially like now at this point, as like a 15-year-old, when I experience imposter syndrome, I like to like take a step back and reflect on like what I have been able to do so far, like the skills I've developed, like recognizing my own growth and the impact of my work already is like inspires me to like celebrate my small wins along the way and realize that in comparison to someone else in the room, I don't have to feel less capable because there is a lot that I've been able to do. But at the same time, especially when I was younger and may not have experienced the extent of success, if you want to use that word, like when I was 7 years old and I first went to a library and I was like, I have this idea for a coding workshop. Like, can I hold a workshop at your library? I think the biggest way I overcame imposter syndrome then was having that sense of confidence in my own work. And what I mean by that is like, I have put my blood, sweat, and tears into this board game. I have stayed up late. I've woken up early. I've tried it out with my friends and my brother and so many people, and I have proof that it works. Like I have worked hard and I have seen the result of my work. So there's no reason that this other person should not believe in me as well. So I think a lot of it has to do with taking time to realize and reflect on yourself and realize that you are absolutely not less than anyone else in that room. And then I think one more thing that's played a significant role is definitely just like mentorship and like connections and a network and support system. Like having mentors who believed in my potential also allowed me to sort of gain perspective and learn from their experiences, right? And they reassured me that everyone faces challenges and doubts regardless of their level of success. And so I learned to embrace the learning process and see challenges as opportunities for growth, and I reframe my mistakes as valuable lessons rather than just failures. So it's about like shifting that mindset from like a fixed like to like almost like a growth oriented one. And like in this process, like as I hold a workshop at a library, as I give a talk somewhere, like I continue to build that network and connect with like these like-minded individuals who I know share similar experiences. And that also almost helps overcome imposter syndrome, because I realize like these are people who have gone through the same thing. They've been in these rooms. And so I definitely say like having and building that network really helps break imposter syndrome as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So like, take me back to like you're building your first board game, or it could be any example that you want, right? That you had to be bad at something to be great at something. Like you had to start out being like pretty bad at it, right? So like, and I get the sense that you push through that. It's almost like sounds like you short circuited, because like a lot of people, as soon as they get that first resistance of not being particularly good at something, they become less, they lose the incentive to keep going pretty quickly. At least that's the case for a lot of people who have this idea but struggle to get it through to realize it. So like, how do you like kind of start off like being bad at something? What gets you to be good at it? Like, how do you get through that process?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good question, because you're absolutely right. Like when you start at something, you're not going to be the best at it. I think understanding that is the first step. Like you cannot be so hard on yourself. Like it's my first time. Why am I not getting this right away? Right. I think it's like having patience with yourself and realizing that you too are learning and growing. And I think for me personally, something that really helped as like a newbie per se, right? Like in this field, is like I had a lot of ideas. I had like a lot of like these like creative juices flowing out of my brain. But then again, like I was 7, 8, even still like 15 years old. I don't have that degree in computer science. I don't have that degree in marketing. I don't have that level of experience or expertise that someone who's been in this field for 40 to 50 years have. And so I think my biggest way of sort of overcoming this like being new in a field is talking to people who have that experience and that depth of innovative ideas. So like for an example, I created CoderBunnyz, and I went to someone who I connected on through LinkedIn, who I knew is working in this field, and he's holding a like workshop series in my local community. And I met up with him, and I told him like I have this idea, but I'm not quite sure where to go with it. And he suggested that what he's been doing is he's been gamifying it in a way that he could then he's been gamifying his own workshop series in ways that he could then spread and teach the community. So I thought, okay, if I take what I have and I gamify it and create like a path, like a workshop series, and then I bring it to the community, I could do the same thing. Mm-hmm. So I think like it was all about like building these connections, meeting people who have been in the spot that you've been in and learning from them. As I'd say, it's because of this one individual that I was able to now hold workshops at over 500 libraries and schools and communities all across the world, because I had this, or I was like almost inspired to find a way to take my board game and make it into a workshop series where I could teach others. And so I think when you're a starter in a field, the biggest way to sort of get good at it, and I say like get good because I'd say no one is perfect in anything yet, and there's always something more you can learn and grow. But it's always like learning from people who've been in the spot that you've been in and may have more experience than you. And I'd say never hesitate to reach out, ask for help, because you will almost always find the right people. Maybe it's not the first time you talk to somebody, maybe they're not the perfect person or the perfect mentor, but you will find people who are willing to help you and support you, and that will truly give you a push forward.
Awesome. Yeah, so you sort of alluded to like trying again and again, like making these connections in this case. So talk to me a little bit about rejection, like your experience with it, like how you like learn to cope with rejection.
Yes, absolutely. So I think when just the word rejection is brought to me, I have like countless thoughts that flow through my brain because there's so many instances I could give you to this day about moments, even just in the past month. If you ask me where have I been rejected, I could probably name three. But one thing that comes to mind immediately is when I was like 8 years old, and I went to like my first few libraries, and I had this idea. Like, I have a board game, I have a slide deck. I want to hold like a 30-minute to hour-long workshop at your library on a Saturday afternoon. How does that sound? And I'd say that the initial response wasn't exactly what I'd want to hear. A lot of people were like, "Oh, like this is really amazing, but we already have coding programs going on in our calendar, or like our calendar slots are already booked at least until the end of this year. So I'd maybe check back next year or try somewhere else." And it was a little discouraging, especially just because I had worked so hard and I was myself so passionate and confident in my ideas. And I was like, well, why aren't you confident in my ideas as well? And I realized, a lot of these, oh, we don't have enough room on the calendar, or we already have other coding programs, might have just been ways to say, well, you're 8 years old. Like, on top of that, like a girl, like, how are you going to come and lead a coding workshop? And honestly, like, who's going to come and listen to you? And I think the only way to overcome that was staying persistent, staying confident in myself and my work. And eventually, I found one librarian who immediately grew hooked onto the idea, and we started holding workshops just that weekend. And I'd say from there, having continuous evidence that this was something I was indeed, as an 8-year-old, capable to do, and there were indeed people who showed up, really helped bring me forward and helped take me to even more places where I could bring my message forward as well.
Awesome. Awesome. I love that. So CoderBunnyz is really interesting because board games would not be the first thing I would have said as like, oh yeah, sure, teach coding with a board game. Like that to me wasn't at all obvious. But so hip hop is all about remixing. That's one of the themes of our event. So how did you like sort of remix these ideas? Because like coding, like there's a way to teach coding, there's syntax, there's all these different things. And the board game world, like no one, I don't think anyone's ever done that before. At least I haven't seen anyone do that before. So like what was like your whole remix process? Like you kind of like tell me how that even worked. Like where you had this idea and like you brought it all the way through because you probably had to try and fail a few different times and like remix things. And how did that work?
Yeah. So I think for me, right, bringing coding onto a board game isn't quite the most conventional idea. But then again, I thought, well, what do my friends love the most? Well, they love board games a lot. And so maybe if I bring coding onto a board game, I could show them how fun it is. So yes, I wouldn't say it would be the most conventional path forward. But then again, I also think that's what sets me apart. And that's what makes my creation just so different than the other ways to currently teach kids how to code. And so I think this sort of collision process, I'd say, was definitely very iterative. And it took a lot of trial and error, a lot of designs, a lot of failures. And I'd say like the best way like I overcame it is becoming very clear in my own goals. So I had to set very clear goals, as in, what am I trying to do? What am I trying to teach? I thought, okay, well, maybe if I teach the concepts used in computer programming, like functions or loops or conditionals, then kids can take away, go to a computer, and when they do the real coding, the concepts will be a lot more familiar because they learned it from playing the game. So it was like ideas like these that I had to become very clear about in my own brain. And I think that was the only way forward when I thought, how am I going to fuse two things that normally don't go together? So it was definitely like creating plans of action. And I think just like as I look forward into the other stuff I've done, I see a lot of the collisions aren't quite conventional. For example, like my other board game, CoderMindz, teaches AI through a board game. And it's the first of its kind, where it's the first ever board game in the world to teach AI concepts. It's not quite conventional, but in order to make it possible, I had to have a very clear idea of what I was trying to do. Or using artificial intelligence in medicine and healthcare technology. Not quite conventional when you think of medicine. But again, you have to have a very clear path forward. And I think that's sort of how I was able to do this sort of fusion.
That's so awesome. And so the board games, again, we have CoderBunnyz, yeah, and that's bunnies with a YZ, correct? Like how do you spell it? So I'm looking up, I want to find that on Amazon. It's Coder and then Bunnies, BUNNYZ, right?
Correct. Yeah, CoderBunnyz, and then CoderMindz, so CoderMindz, which teaches AI, and then CoderMarz, CoderMarz, which teaches coding and AI.
Awesome. So I've already got CoderBunnyz for my nieces and nephews, so that's coming to their Christmas tree. So you had this moment where you were a consumer of board games, and then you're a producer. Like, did you kind of have this realization, like, oh yeah, I'm actually creating this thing? Like, and like you've been an entrepreneur at such a young age, right? But like, was there like this moment where you kind of like, well, no, I'm actually doing this. This is actually like, I actually am a producer and I am a creator now. Like, was there like kind of a moment where you had that like sort of moment of like clarity and realization that like you had actually done this thing?
Yeah, I think when I first set out, I would say I never sort of set out to become like a producer or an entrepreneur. I'd say I just set out to solve a problem. I set out to just make coding something my friends thought was boring, just fun and easy for them to understand. So I would never say I set out to be a producer, though I would say in retrospect, it's not also something I obviously like regret. But I'd also say I think I started becoming a producer the moment I started writing my own code. And I'd say that's what's really powerful to me personally about learning how to code and like that skill in and of itself. Like when I designed a Flappy Bird game, I became a producer, no longer a consumer. When I designed a simple calculator app, I became a producer, not a consumer. And now when I developed a AI-powered tool to help doctors in precision medicine with ovarian cancer, I'd say I became a producer. And so I think that's also something that really sticks out to me about the power of code itself. It's like the moment you start writing your own code, you become a producer of these technologies and no longer a consumer.
You mentioned the flow state. It sounds like when you're in that flow state, like how do you drop into a flow state? That idea where like time is like disappearing, you're so into what you're doing, and like 7 hours later, you're like you don't even notice the time go.
It's something I've worked really hard on sort of building, and I'd still say I struggle with it. But I think in order to get into a flow space, first of all, you need to have a clear mind. So whether that means before you start, like take a step away from your computer, like go for a walk, get a snack, call a friend, whatever it is, you need to be in a clear state of mind. If something is bothering you, you need to make it stop bothering you. Like you need to, whatever it is, drop all your problems off somewhere and be like, okay, I'm forgetting about this for 3 hours and I can pick up that problem again in 3 hours, but for now I need to drop it off somewhere. So it's completely clearing your head, because I think without a clear head, you will not get anything done. Because if those like negative thoughts are still flowing through your brain, then despite the work that you're doing, it's not going to be productive. It's not going to be effective, because you have like that negative energy still in your brain. So first of all, you need to clear your headspace. And that's something I really, really struggle with. Like I really, really struggle with that. And so definitely something I'm still working on, but you need to completely clear your headspace. And then you need to, for me, like I have a playlist and I plug in my AirPods and then I just get in the zone. So whatever that is for you, whether that be like, like for me, sometimes I have to like set my LED lights to a certain color and that will help me focus. Or I put on certain music and that helps me focus. But I think the biggest thing to get into a flow zone is having like a very, very clear headspace. And then having a very clear plan of what you're trying to do. So it's like, I'm going to sit for 3 hours and I'm going to complete this task. Or like, even as a high school student, I'm going to sit for 3 hours and I'm going to study these 4 chapters of my math textbook. And so whatever that may be, having a clear goal in mind of what you're trying to do, a little mechanism to get you into that space, whether that be music or colored lights. And then before that, even just dropping off all your emotional baggage somewhere else that you completely cannot worry about for the few hours that you want to focus.
Myra, you are so awesome. You're so inspiring. You certainly are to me personally. I know you're going to be super inspiring to everyone who gets to see this after the event or at the event. I'm pretty sure, like in 10 years, I'm going to be bragging about the fact that, yeah, I interviewed Samayra when she was 15. You're going to be so successful. It's so obvious. You already are so successful, and yeah, I'm so excited that other people are going to get to hear your story. So thank you for joining us. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure to be here.